Which kingdom is home to living things that are neither plants, animals, nor fungi? So I'm going to give you some minutes to think about this. Okay, so the answer is Kingdom Protista. All right, so this kingdom will have different organisms that fall under this kingdom. So what is Kingdom Protista? So protists are simple, mostly microscopic organisms, and it's very important to know that they just have one cell. So they are unicellular. They have just one cell, unlike some organisms that are multicellular that have many cells. So they fit neatly into the planets, into the plants, animals, or fungus kingdom. So they are grouped on their own. They don't fit neatly into this. They don't fit neatly into these kingdoms. So they're not classified as plants, animals, or fungus. So they have their own kingdom. Okay. So example of protists, you have your Amoeba, you have your Paramecium, and you have your Euglena. So it's very important to know most of the members. And where can you find them? They're mostly found in water and moist soil, and few of them live in other organisms as a parasite. Okay, they causes disease, causes infection to different organisms, and causes harm to those organisms. So they are not as parasites. Okay, so two features that all protists share is very common to all protists. They're unicellular, they have just one cell, and they are eukaryotic. It means they still have a true membrane-bound nucleus. So the nucleus have a well-structured membrane. Okay, unlike some species that are said to be prokaryotic. So prokaryotic like a bacteria, but they are not said to be bacteria. So so they have what we call the eukaryotic cells. So the prokaryotic cells, they don't have a membrane-bound nucleus. Okay, so that makes them not prokaryotic and makes them to be eukaryotic. All right. So it's very important to understand that. We have some protozoa, which is an animal like, for example, they move about and feed on other organisms like tiny animals. I will call this what holozoic nutrition. They move about and look for tiny organisms. So there's some organisms that are found in water that seem to be zooplankton. They're very small, you cannot see them with your eyes. So they are fed upon by the protozoans. Okay, so example of the protozoans, we have the amoeba, you have paramecium, you have euglena, you have plasmodium. And plasmodium is very common that causes malaria because the pathogens that causes malaria in humans. Okay, so some of them have what we call pseudopodia. So pseudopodia is kind of like a false feet, finger-like bodies which flows forward. Okay, and a very good example of this organism is your amoeba. So amoeba have what we call the pseudopodia, which is used for a lot of things. Sometimes they even use this pseudopodia for locomotion. Okay, so and some organisms have what we call the cilia. And what is the cilia? The cilia is a tiny like hair thread that beats towards in waves. So plasmodium move by beating the cilia. So they beat the cilia, they move from one place to another. Okay, a very good example is your paramecium. The flagella, for example, like Euglena, is a long whip-like tail that lashes back and forth, pulling the sail along. As they move back and forth, they tend to what? To move forward. Okay, and a good example is what? Your Euglena. All right. Then you have your algae, which is plant-like. They're green. They're those greenish plants you found in the water. They're not algae. They contain chlorophyll, and they make their own food by photosynthesis. So in most plants, you have some greenish structure found in plants. You cannot see the structure in water, in damp water. You cannot actually see them with the eyes except you check the microscope. Then you can see the architects of them. So they're known as algae. And a good example, you have a chlamydomonas, you have your spirogyra, and you have your diatoms. So it's very important. Okay. So the next thing, fungus like protists. There are some protists that are like fungus, and they have no chlorophyll at all. The chlorophyll makes them green. They have no chlorophyll, and they feed on dead or decaying matter. And because of this, they're said to be saprophytic in nature. And a good example, you have a slime mold, you have a water mold. Okay, so the next thing you need to check again is a mode of nutrition. It's very important. So some of them are autotrophic, which means they make their own food, like the algae, and some of them are holozoic because they feed on other organisms, for example, like the protozoa. And some of them are saprophytic that feed on decaying matter, like a fungus-like example, like a slime mold. Okay. Then reproduction. So most of them reproduce by binary fission. So the parent cell simply splits into two identical daughter cells. Okay, which is called the binary fission. Fission, yeah. So protists can cause disease. All right. For example, a plasmodium causes malaria, which spread by the bite of a female Anopheles mosquito. All right. So these mosquito serve as a vector. Vector are organisms that carries pathogens. So the plasmodium is found into the female, and once it beats your skin, what happens? They insert the plasmodium in your skin, and then the plasmodium starts to cause just into your skin and start causing what infection known as malaria, which is disease. Yeah. So importance of protists. So algae release oxygen and support water life. Tiny protists like the plankton are food for fish, and fungus-like protists help decompose dead matter. Okay, so one question. Euglena photosynthesize like a plant, but can also swim and feel like an animal. Which kingdom does it belong? So the answer is Kingdom Protista, just something to warm up. And protists are grouped together precisely because they mix features of different kingdoms. Yeah. Okay. So just kind of a summary. You can take your time to go through it. Just go through a kind of summary of everything we've discussed about the Protista. So it gives you an overview of what they do and kind of effect the course. So you can just pause the video and just go through these features. Okay. So thank you very much. I'm going to see you in my next video when I give you more examples of the next kingdom, which is Kingdom Monera. All right. So thank you and see you next time.